That's our starting point. Okay, that's great. That would be a boring tool. I mean, we could do this with a static map if we wanted to. We don't really need the dynamicism of going over and mousing over and getting a value, except when you start to change the geographic levels, and here's where it gets interesting. So if I go here and say, well, if I could type. There we go. Did you know there was a Forsyth County in North Carolina? Now you do. All right, so there's Forsyth County. And now it's actually changed for me. I was going to change it, but since I was zooming in because of the search, the system went ahead and guessed for me. It pulled a Google on me, and it's changed it to census tracts. We remember census tracts from the hierarchy. Basically, just to interpret that a little further, census tracts are roughly between 4,000 and 8,000 households, or I'm sorry, residents. So the census tracts is interesting because not only can you see a county level information, but then you can see where within that area, and let me zoom out a little so it's easier to see. So if I'm looking at different tracts within Forsyth County, I can see that this one right here, remember this Georgia average? It was 49,000, right? The median? That tract is doing a lot better. What's going on in that tract? That's probably a more affluent neighborhood, probably a lot nicer houses, maybe a golf course, I'm not quite sure. Well, how can this help when I'm looking at this? Well, it helps to show disparity. Right next door, that drops below the state average. What's going on in that area? I don't know. I'm not from Forsyth. You might know better if you know that tract, or it may lead you to the questions necessary to find out what's causing that disparity. A different way to look at it is the data matters to everybody for different reasons. And this is what I mean by that. If I'm a community outreach person or somebody who works with people who have low household income or are in poverty, this is my area where I'm seeing opportunity. I'm seeing, well, that's the area I need to go work in Forsyth County, because obviously they're a lighter shade when looking at this map, along with, actually this is in Gwinnett. If we go up here, that's another Forsyth that's in that less than 50,000, so less than the state median, all right? But on the other side of things, you know, other groups that are looking at data may be interested in the, if I can mouse over, right, 76,000 plus, because maybe I'm looking to put a high-end store or a luxury automobile shop somewhere. Am I going to put it where there's need, or am I going to put it where there seems to be more disposable income? So that's the type of things that we get every day. Matter of fact, this year so far I've probably had, I think, 542, but who's counting, cases. And in our world, cases are people calling in workshops like this or presentations like this, people calling or emailing for business plans for some number, for me to walk them through something. And it ranges from things like this for business, things like this for community outreach, and for nonprofits. Election cycles, I get real busy too, because during election cycles, everybody wants to know where all the younger and older voters are. Younger so that they can register more voters, older so that they can speak to their constituency a little more directly, and so on and so forth. You know, this is not the only category within this particular version of Census Explorer. We also have the 65 and over, total population, foreign born, bachelor's degree or more. Let's see if we got a correlation here. If I go there, we do see that that same area that was a little less income also tends to have a lower percentage of bachelor's degree, which we know is consistent with what we know about statistics in general in this country. The higher the education level, usually the more affluent, higher median household income you're likely to have. On the other hand, some of these other areas have a higher percentage. You're talking about 13 versus 33%. And now you start to see another layer of why the map is colored a certain way. Not only this map, but the last map, and we start to build on that. And then we have other things as well. Those are in the labor force. This is the interesting one for the luxury type vendors and retailers, because this is households that are only 150,000 or more, so that they're really doing okay. And that starts to move closer into the city and different neighborhoods and areas over there. You can actually go back to 2000 census long form data to kind of give you a comparison, or even back to the 1990 census. But we start to see how tools like this, instead of just looking at a spreadsheet, will give you the ability to get information, visualize it, and actually even have a numerical value associated with it when you scroll over. So this is where we're heading, thankfully, because this is relatively new. It started earlier this year and late last year. So we're trying to do more things like this, hopefully to give people more data awareness, and so more people are using the statistics in general. Now, and you'll have to let me know if we're running short on time, but
well, class ends at 10:02.
Great, good, got plenty of time. So now let's go on to the American Fact Finder. So Census Explorer, we looked at one edition, and that was the first edition that came out. We also have a retail edition and other editions. It's one of those things, if you get into it, or when you get into it, hopefully, it'll be very interesting, and you may use different editions of the Census Explorer to make different cases or argument for whatever your project or assignments may be. I encourage you to use all of them, or look at all of them at least, because the more you look at the statistics, the more you know what's available, the more ideas you're going to have. And that gives you greater flexibility, not only in this class, but going on to other classes and hopefully into your future. Now, the American Fact Finder is our data mining tool with a little bit more oomph. It's got a little bit more flexibility, which can be daunting if you're not used to working with it. You're talking about a system that's built on filtering. And I'll give you an example of what we're talking about. If I just go to a general topic, let me just go under people, let's just go to age. All right, you see that number in parentheses. I'm going to explain that number in just a second. So without further filter, I just filtered by age, we have 9,151 tables that are defaulted on that. And those, because I haven't selected geography, are defaulted to the nation. All right, so this is why a filtering system is so necessary when dealing with census data mining. We just have too much stuff. It's good, but it's also bad. It can be very confusing. And so the trick is trying to find systems that can help you get to certain things. And this is what I spend a lot of my time teaching people, data users, how to use the system so that they can arrive at the numbers themselves, because there's only one of me. And when I get really busy, you know, it's better if people learn how to do this, and then I can support them and be their resource going forward, than if I have to come out every time somebody has a question and do it for them. It's that old adage of teach a person to fish type thing. So there's a lot of information, a lot of data, and here's the catch to this. This system is actually not going to be re-upped. So I'm kind of teaching you it with that thought in mind that, you know, it's going to go away probably after 2016. So we still have a few years left, but it's not, no more money is going into it. We're still going to update the data sets until 2016. But then we're anticipating, and the reason we didn't re-up partially is because technology is changing so fast. We fully expect somebody in this class probably to develop an app that'll make all this obsolete. And we're developing apps, and hopefully we'll get to some of those at the end. Not any of them can do what this does so far, but I'm sure it's just one clever app programmer away from having something, and we're trying to do it at the Census Bureau as well. So we'll see if the government does it first or the free market does it first. Free market tends to beat us in those regards a lot of time. All right, so let's look at certain things, and let's bring in some input here, either from your teacher or from somebody in the class. What's a topic that you guys have been discussing that you may want to see if there's a way to map it in a data level? Don't everybody jump forward at once.
What's our topic been for this unit? Well, the population.
Okay.
So what elements of the population? What chapter are you guys on right now? What's in chapter 3? There you go, movement of people.
Okay. All right, so movement, and I must mention, because we did talk, Mr. Elrod and I talked about migration movement. We have a great tool called Census Flows Mapper. I say great tools. Last night I was prepping for this, and it doesn't work right now. There's some kind of script error, and not unusual, mostly because there's a huge release today. And sometimes when that happens, everything else gets pushed to the back burner. So if there's a little glitch, they're not going to fix it. We can try it a little later, but it wasn't working even early this morning. So unfortunately, I can't use that tool, but there are tables within this that tell us about domestic migration and such. So let's look at something like that. So first off, let's pick a geography. In this case, we'll go to a geography overlay window. And it's important to note that this is an overlay. It actually scrolls off a little bit here, but what I mean by overlay is you're going to have to close out of this filtering system before you continue afterwards. And let me do this to kind of make it all fit on screen. I think that'll do it. There you go. It's a little small, but hopefully you can see. Now there's different tabs within the geography overlay filter. List is a good place to start because it's drop-down menus. It kind of guides you, hold your hand a little bit. In case you're not familiar with census geographies, which I wouldn't anticipate a lot of people in here are very familiar with it, but I prefer the naming one just because I kind of know my way around, and it's still pretty intuitive, and it has a search field, which I find very helpful. You can also go to address. This is where if you don't know your census tract, you can plug in your street address, city, state, and zip code, and it'll give you all the census geographies, not only census tract, but all the census geographies tied to that particular address. So it's a very useful tool when you're doing that kind of research. And we even have a map tab if all else fails and you just want to draw a circle around an area of Georgia, which you kind of have interest in. The system will recognize whatever is in or touches that circle. And depending on the hierarchy you have selected, you can make it select all the counties in that circle and your selection tool. So we have different ways of getting to the geography you need. But just in the interest of time and keeping it simple, we're going to do a little hybrid search here. We're going to use the geography filter options on the left, and let's start with counties. In parentheses, you see over 10,000 things that are registered under counties is what that parenthetical number means. So if I click on it, it starts to filter within the filter. Understand that up in the left corner you see behind the overlay, you see your selections. Ultimately, we want to start filtering in that box because that's actually going to result in the tables starting to manifest on our search screen. Okay, but within this overlay for now, we look at counties. Luckily, Georgia alphabetically is very friendly, unlike South Carolina. We don't have to scroll a whole lot, so I can just put all counties in Georgia and we'll start with that. The reason I'm starting with so many counties, anybody know how many counties there are in Georgia?
159.
Very good. You'd be surprised how few times I've heard the correct answer. And again, I'm in rooms with senators, congresspeople, and whatnot, and a lot of times I don't get the right answer. So you're ahead of them in that regard. So 159, and where's that rank as far as states with number of counties in the country? Yes?
Number 2.
Behind?
Texas.
There we go. We got the savant up in the front. Very good job. We'll be sending you to a census job site soon so you can apply. So if we look at counties and all counties within Georgia, the reason I also selected all counties was because to do thematic mapping through the American Fact Finder, it's based on comparative geography. So in other words, that's a fancy way of saying that you cannot map one selection. If you have one county, there's really no point in thematic mapping to map it. It's got to be kind of a comparison. And that's why I like going with all counties. You can handpick certain counties if you're doing specific research. The system allows for all that. So if I wanted to select Forsyth Hall, Cherokee, Gwinnett, and Rabun County, I could do that if I wanted to. However, in this case, I want a nice uniform state map, so I'm going to select all the counties. So I look at that, and now I'm going to go over to topics, because that's the next overlay that's going to give me the information I need. Now, there's a lot of things here, and quite frankly, unless I'm here to tell you this, it would just be a kind of play with it until you figure things out type of thing. And one of the things we do, one of the services we provide is we walk people through it, but also what works is just getting in there and figuring it out when you have a little time. And in our case, a little tip is if it's people-driven data you want, just go to people. And most of the data you'll be dealing with is going to be people-driven because you are, after all, in human geography. So as we look at that and we look at the origins, another keyword, and you're going to have to become familiar with our naming conventions because some people might put in migration, and some of our table names have migration and things in them, but at least at this initial stage, you're going to have to start to associate certain words with certain things. And in this case, once I open up origins, I can see several things, whether it be foreign born, citizenship, ancestry, and also migration, international, domestic, and even migration previous residence. We're going to go with the first one, a little less options, but that may simplify our task this morning because the other one you can see there's over 1,000 in that.
So while that's loading, what are the odds that we get Milton County?
We will get Milton County.
Think so?
Yeah, because it's going to default to the 5-year, or at least when we look at the 5-year, it should be able to produce data at that level. Now, I say that, but there are certain thresholds. that we have to be careful of at the Census Bureau, because first and foremost, we're under Title 13 of the U.S. Code, meaning we have to protect, part of that U.S. Code says that we have to protect people's confidentiality. So when the sample size is too small, and it could possibly in some way lead to the identification of a household of that person, we have to do what's called suppress the data and put it in a different data set or a particular file. So there's a chance that we might run into some of that when it comes to data thresholds. So let's see what we have here. So if I look at the 5-year, and why is the reason I'm going to the 5-year? It's kind of testing you to see if you were paying attention during the slides. It's okay, it's the morning. I didn't even pay attention to some of my own slides. But why did I go to 5-year when I go to 159 counties in Georgia? Yes?
The bigger the gap between data collection, the bigger the chance that the data isn't correct anymore.
I see what you're saying. Not exactly what I was going for. There's certain thresholds that were established by that slide. Weren't there? Remember 1, 3, and 5? If I pick 1 year, will all 159 counties show me data? No. Only ones of 65,000 or more. So I know 159 counties of Georgia. I've worked it thoroughly. I know that not every county has 65,000 or more. Not every county has the 3-year, 20,000 or more. So you have to go with the 5-year. Because some of those smaller counties, like a Raven County, like a Tolliver County and certain other counties, they're going to need that 5-year collection period in order to show up on these tables. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go to the 5-year so I get a complete map, because that's what I'm looking for. Now we should be okay still on loading, because the West Coast hasn't woken up yet, and they tend to slow things down when they do. So luckily it did. Now here's the table, and you got the table ID up here, you got the table title, you got the 5-year American Community Survey. You can modify the table, and that has a lot of options once you click that. Bookmark I wanted to feature real quick. When I hit that, this is actually the link. If I were to copy that link that's highlighted, that's the link that'll get you to this exact table every time. It's what we call a deep link. Now a lot of people who are used to using internet browsers are like, well, Mr. Vasquez, and please don't call me that. Why is that not the link up there? Well, actually, it's not. It has to do with technology that you probably understand better than I do. But you know, it's JavaScript shells, all these things. Trust me when I tell you that this link that's highlighted up here in your browser address window will only take you back to Fact Finder in general. This one will actually take you back to this same table every time, which is very helpful if you want to continue to refer to a table. You can't get to it all in one day, but don't want to go through the steps of looking it up again. Just copy that link and either save it somewhere or send it to yourself. That'll be very helpful. And then you can also, sorry, the glare is behind. You can print it directly from here. You can download it, and there's multiple formats to download. Comma separated values, which opens up into Excel spreadsheet and different things. If you're going to crunch numbers, that's a good thing to do. And then you have create a map. But let's look at the table real quick and see what it tells us. Okay, so it's going through the counties, and this is one of the reasons you download it, and more of a reason why I'm going to map it. Because we only have 2 counties that show up. There's so many columns, and you can modify that, but even if you modify it down to the bare minimum, you're going to have maybe 4 or 5 counties that are represented on the first page. Nobody's going to sit there and scroll through 159 counties. You're either going to download it into a spreadsheet where you can start to filter and sort, or what I prefer to do and what you'll prefer to do in this class is you're going to map it out. So that way you have a visual interpretation. The only drawback is out of all these data topics, which are represented by the rows, you can only map one thing at a time in thematic mapping. So there's no cross variables, no multiple categories. It's one and done. But that's kind of a good thing. It simplifies it, you know, less confusion, and quite frankly, the system is not set up to do cross variable type tabulations. That would be another system, which is for another day. So anyways, so if I look at this, and I look period 1 year and over, and it starts to tell me whether they moved within the same county, moved from a different county, same state, moved from a different state, a move from abroad, or in other words, internationally. So that's kind of the information we're looking at.
Yep.
Okay, great. So now if I wanted to map this, all I gotta do, I don't need to scroll to Milton or any other county. I can just create a map. It's gonna tell me to click on a data value in the table to map. Do not click on a margin of error, because that will produce an error, but you're gonna look at one of the values. So what are we picking right now?
what category we pick?
Sure, moved within the same county, same state.
Let's do, can we do it from a different state?
Yeah, moved from a different state, and we're going to go with the move from a different state, the estimate right here. Yeah. So once I identify that, it's going to go ahead and assume, all of them in that row. And it's going to show me a map if it behaves. Fingers crossed here. It usually does. But at schools, for some reason, it sometimes takes a little longer. Also, you got to understand, the system is currently trying to pull all those data cells from 159 counties. So it takes it a little time to get it all done. But once it does, we should be able to play with it and have a little fun. There we go. All right, so I still, to this day, do not know why they picked that horrid green color to start with. I don't know if it has something to do with somebody at Census headquarters just liking green. I don't like it. Good thing is I can change it. Your favorite color is pink, blue, whatever. You can change it. You're going to drop it into your presentation, might as well make it your own, right? So if I'm looking at this, it tells me the data class is by percent over here, and let's remind ourselves what we're looking at here. So we're looking at thematic map of move from different state, estimate population 1 year and over, geography by county. Okay, so let me go to color and data classes, and I can start to refine this map. I already said that I'm not real fond on this color, just a particular thing with me. I'm kind of more of a blue guy. So I'll go with blue. I'll press OK. Maybe I don't want that yellowish tinge, so I go more towards a white, just to be picky. A little wider there, and then I hit go, and it should recolor accordingly. Okay, it defaults to 50% transparency. Very helpful if I'm zooming in and I want to see features and roads underneath so I can kind of get my bearings. Good, but if I'm just putting it into a presentation, maybe I want a more solid color so it matches up more with the solid colors in the data class legend on the left. So in that case, I just take the transparency down to 0, a more solid map. All right, see how pretty easy, right? You just play with it a little bit. Now, let's say I've got particular research I'm doing, and I've got my own threshold in mind. And the only ones that interest me, I'm not concerned about places that have that low percentage of that move from another state. What I am concerned with is a certain threshold in my mind. Let's say it's 15%. That's my line. Maybe my teacher gave it to me. Maybe that's just what my argument's about that particular day. And start to expand your thinking on this. Okay, we're looking at one table, but this could be a number of categories right now. This could be median income. This could be, people of high income. This could be people who've experienced poverty, which is also a question on the ACS. It could be ancestry. So, and I'll give you a real world example of this. Ancestry, I've had several sub-Saharan African nations. I believe it was Sierra Leone that their embassy was reaching out to us to get the most updated information. But they were only concerned because they had limited resources of finding counties throughout the US that had a certain percentage or amount, more so, a numeric amount of at least 100 or more Sierra Leoneans. I think I'm saying that right. And so we can create a map and establish a threshold like such. If I have a threshold, I might change the data classes to 2 to make it simple. So now all you have is white and blue. It's going to be real nice and neat. It's kind of a visual sort. I'm going to change natural breaks, which what it defaults to user defined. And what did I say? I said 15%, right? So I put 14.9 as the end range for the white color. And so everything 15% or higher should show up in blue. And if it doesn't let me down, I only see one county that really shows me that. Now, that tells me that if I have a certain amount of resources and I need to focus on a county, that's the one I'm focusing on. That may be where I extend my research. That may also tell me that I don't only want one county. I've got a little bit more than that to reach out. So I may want several counties, so I may change that to 10%. The point is I can start to manipulate the visual interpretation of data to suit what my needs are, whatever they may be. And as long as the data exists, and in this case it does, we can do that with this kind of mapping. So there's a whole host of things that can be helpful in a whole range of topics that this can possibly assist, and it does. Like I said, over 500 cases I've had this year alone, and I'd say at least 10% of them involve some kind of mapping where they set the visual sort themselves in a thematic map once I showed them how to do it. And they were very happy afterwards because it helps them to strategize and to implement whatever strategies they may have in mind for whatever data they're dealing with. All right? So, and just to carry that out further, if I wanted just to say 5% or more. And a good example of where this might be helpful is home builders and other service providers who are looking at county maps of Georgia and are wanting to know where people are coming in from. And in the other map, unfortunately, the one that isn't working, the other system, Census Flows Mapper, it actually helps you see where people are coming from. So if I click on Forsyth County and Census Flows Mapper, if it was working, it would tell me, it would show me visually that some people come from over here in the United States, some people from over here, and it has an inbound, outbound type pattern to it, which is also helpful when you're looking at data to know not only a change, but where people might be coming from as well. Okay? Any questions on this?
Yeah, one right.
Sure.
Can you make proportional symbol maps using this?
I'm sorry?
Can you make proportional symbol maps using the system?
Like percentage-wise of just any category?
Any category.
Okay. If it exists in the table, yes. Like in this case, the percentages were right there. Now in some tables, you only have a numeric option, and you can only map what's in the table. So unfortunately, that's not going to help you too much. Now, this is just within census systems. There's a whole world out there of geography that gets much more detailed than this. This is a very simple system, actually. I mean, when you talk about other mapping tools, you know, ArcGIS and things like that, there's software out there. I'm not sure if you've talked about it, but ArcGIS is a major software. You do a Google search, Bing search, whatever search engine you use, and you'll find a lot on ArcGIS, on an organization called Esri. They can create all sorts of maps using our data. And what you would do then, if you had such software or any kind of mapping software, and there's free mapping software online, by the way, certain ones, make sure it's not a bug-infested one before you go downloading it and blaming me. So I won't suggest any particular ones. But you know, if you search for one, you might be able to find free mapping software where if you take our data up here, just a table format, and you download it as a CSV, which is a very interpretable file for most mapping software, and you include what's called the shape files down here, then you could, shape file just gives it a geographic shape, as the name implies. You can actually create your own custom maps by anything. Now, unfortunately, you're limited to only what's in the table when you're dealing with AFF mapping, American Fact Finder. Sorry, I'm speaking in acronyms. But if you're so bold as to play around with mapping systems elsewhere, then you would download it and you could go through that process separately. And that's something, if you ever get to that level, we can start talking about that. I can even maybe perhaps get a geographer to come down here, a census geographer, and show you how they do some of their mapping at that level. But that's pretty detailed. Okay? Hope I kind of answered your question there.
Brian, do you have a question? Can you make it have a key on there?
I'm sorry?
Can you make it have a map key on there?
Map key? Well, the legend is built in on the left, but we can further specify things. See, right here is the data classes, so that's basically your legend. However, we can also go down, and I'm glad you brought it up because I'm ignoring some of these other features. You can also list boundaries and features. If I wanted to show census tracts within a county and then reapply a transparency, if I zoom in, you can start seeing how the county breaks down, kind of like Census Explorer did. Excuse me. You can also go to find a location if you want to find a particular city within one of these maps, and you can just type that in, and you can, and this may be what helps what your question, you can also set up your own map markers. You can write things on the map, you can put arrows, dots, points of emphasis, and before you export it and download it into a JPEG or something where you can plug it into your report or your presentation. So there is some flexibility. Again, this is a powerful system, although very simple, which is a good thing, but it does have some features like being able to sort your own data and colors and classes, assign your boundaries and features, find a location within the map, establish map markers, And not to mention, you know, when in doubt, because you may not know what some of these counties are, you can hit the information button and click on one of them, and it'll give you the data value if you don't want to toggle back and forth between the tables. Sometimes this process takes a little bit to load, kind of trying to find the information that populates that particular graphic. But it is helpful once you don't know, or if you don't know exactly what you're looking at, to identify the geography. Any other questions? Okay. And I'm going to interrupt this because it might take a little bit. Okay, the system remembers what you've done, so if I wanted to move on to another topic, I would exit out of migration just by clicking the X button here. Although if we're not done, we can actually just scroll down and see what else we have. You know, it starts to give you other things like geographic mobility by social characteristics, by selected characteristics. And that's interesting because then in the table it's bringing in other data topics, which might be interesting because then it can, and you'll see once it comes up. So not only do you have your basic age ranges, sex, gender, race, and Hispanic or Latino origin. So it starts telling you of the people who moved within the same county or any of those categories you see on top. Let's find some more out about them. You know, are they black, Asian? Are they Hispanic, non-Hispanic? What's their marital status? What's their citizenship status? So this is the type, when you start getting all these data topics and mixing them together, being able to differentiate them by column, you can start to see, is there tendencies? Like, are people who move from another state, are they a particular race or ethnicity usually? Are they a particular, you know, educational attainment? Maybe you notice, and we have before, that people of lower educational attainment, either at one end or high educational attainment, tend to move around more for very different reasons, you know? So that's one of the things. As far as income goes, obviously you would think that the higher your income level, the easier it is for you to move from place to another, but maybe the higher the income level, the more you establish roots and you don't move. So there's two sides to that story as well. What does the data tell you? So these type of things, whenever you see characteristics added to one of our tables, in this case geographic mobility by selected characteristics, it's a very interesting table usually, at least to me it is, because it tells you more than just the number of people going from X to Y to Z location. It also tells you a little bit more about them as far as what comprises that group and what tendencies do we see in the statistics perhaps. So learn to scroll a little bit deeper than just the first few options. Usually you'll get your answer in the first few tables that show up, but a lot of times you'll get a lot richer characteristics if you keep on scrolling down and looking at some of the other categories. Now if I go back to X out of this and go back to topics, back to people, and then look at origins again, but this time go over to migration previous residence. Now we'll start to get into some more specifics. All right, some of these are the same. Oh, that was the one from before, sorry. So, and sometimes it's hit or miss. You can kind of see a table, it may not work.